A cooler. That's it. That's the product. And somehow, two brothers turned that into a billion-dollar brand that made grown men argue on the internet about a box that keeps things cold. But here's the thing. It was never really about the cooler. Let me set the scene. It's 2006. You're in Texas. You're a fisherman. You've got a cooler, a cheap plastic $20 thing, and you've had it for maybe 2 summers. The hinge snapped last July. A bear basically looked at it and it opened. The ice lasts maybe a day if you're lucky, half a day if it's hot, which in Texas, it's always hot. You've accepted this. Everyone has. Coolers are disposable. Coolers are cheap. Coolers are the thing you forget in the back of the truck. That's just the rule. And then two brothers said, what if it wasn't? Sounds simple. It wasn't. Roy and Ryan Siders grew up fishing and hunting. Not weekend warrior fishing. Not Instagram fishing. The kind where you're out before sunrise, you're filthy by 9 a.m., and the only thing between your catch and a $200 loss is the cooler keeping everything cold. They weren't inventors. They weren't engineers with whiteboards full of equations. They were just two guys who were tired. Tired of cheap coolers. Tired of replacing them every season. Tired of the ice melting too fast. Tired of the latches breaking. Tired of the whole thing just being bad. And here's a detail most people miss about where this story starts. Roy was already running a cooler business before YETI. Not a huge one, a small custom cooler operation. He was literally already inside the industry. He'd seen the supply chain. He knew what these things cost to make. He knew the margins. He knew exactly how cheap the big brands were building them. And that knowledge, that behind-the-scenes look at how it actually worked, that's what made what happened next either the most logical thing in the world or the most insane. Here's the problem they saw. Every cooler on the market was built around one assumption. Cheap is fine. The logic made sense. Coolers are utilitarian. They hold ice. They go in your garage. Nobody's proud of their cooler. You just own one. It breaks, you buy another one. That's the cycle. The whole industry was designed around that cycle. Walmart had a grip on the market. Coleman, Igloo, giant brands, massive distribution, rock-bottom prices. And Roy and Ryan looked at all of that established power, and decided they were going to build the opposite of what everyone else was building. Not a cheaper cooler, a better one. Way, way better. The kind of cooler that could take a beating, that kept ice for days, that a bear literally couldn't break into, which, as it turns out, became one of their actual selling points. Bear-proof. That's not marketing fluff. That's a real certification they pursued. The problem was, to build something like that, it wasn't going to cost $20. It wasn't going to cost $50. It was going to cost $250 at minimum. And that's where most people, smart people, business people, people with spreadsheets, would have stopped. That's where the story almost ended before it began. Think about what they were actually proposing. They wanted to sell a cooler for the price of a decent office chair, for the price of a plane ticket, for the price of something that does something interesting, not a box that keeps beer cold. They took the idea to retailers, and the retailers said no. Of course they said no. Nobody will pay $250 for a cooler, said every single person they talked to. And look, those people weren't wrong based on what they knew. Nothing in the data said anyone was waiting for a premium cooler brand. Nothing in history said this worked. But Roy and Ryan had something the spreadsheet people didn't have. They had the customer. Not the average customer. Not the casual tailgater. Not the person buying a cooler at Target because theirs cracked. Their customer was the guy who spends $40,000 on a fishing boat and then puts his catch in a $30 cooler. Think about that for a second. $40,000 boat, $30 cooler. There's a mismatch there, a psychological gap. A person who takes their hobby dead seriously, who invests real money, real time, real obsession into it, but whose gear fails them at the last step. That person wasn't being served. That person existed, millions of them, and they were invisible to the big brands because the big brands were looking at average buyers, not obsessed ones. YETI was never for everyone. It was for that guy, and that changed everything. Here's where it gets weird. They launch in 2006. They start selling through small, independent retailers. Hunting stores, fly fishing shops, marine dealers. Not Walmart, not Target, not anywhere you'd expect. And something unusual starts happening. The coolers start spreading. Not through advertising. They barely had an advertising budget. Not through a PR campaign. Not through a celebrity endorsement. They spread because people talked about them. Guy buys a Yeti, takes it on a fishing trip. His buddy asks about it. Buddy buys one. Now there's 2 Yetis in the friend group. Someone sees it at a tailgate. Now there's 4. Word of mouth. Old school. Exactly the kind of growth that's impossible to engineer and impossible to fake. But here's the detail that's almost too perfect. The people buying Yetis were proud of them. Not just satisfied. Proud. They were putting Yeti stickers on their trucks, on their boats, on their laptops. Which, think about it, that's a cooler brand sticker. On a laptop. That's not normal product loyalty. That's something else entirely. What was happening, without anyone planning it, was that Yeti had accidentally become a signal. If you had a Yeti, it meant something about you. It meant you were serious. It meant you didn't compromise. It meant you were the kind of person who spent $300 on a cooler because you understood why. The cooler became a badge. And once a product becomes a badge, once owning it says something about you, you've got something no competitor can copy by cutting costs. Now here's the part that doesn't get talked about enough. Yeti almost didn't make it. Not because the product failed. The product worked. People loved it. The word of mouth was real. The problem was cash. Building a premium product is expensive. The roto-molded construction, the thing that makes Yeti coolers essentially indestructible, costs real money per unit. Their margins were thin in the early years. Distribution was a grind. And at the same time, the moment Yeti started showing success, the copies came. Because that's always what happens. Something works, and then 15 other companies show up with cheaper versions trying to eat your lunch. Yeti-style coolers. Same look, half the price. Sometimes a quarter of the price. And this is the moment where most brands get destroyed. Because if your whole pitch is "we're better," and then someone shows up with "we're similar and cheaper," you've got a problem. A real problem. So what do? How do you defend a $300 cooler against a $60 cooler that looks almost identical? Yeti's answer wasn't to lower prices. It wasn't to run ads attacking the knockoffs. It wasn't to prove feature by feature why theirs was technically superior. Their answer was, "We're not competing with you." By 2012, they were pushing toward $30 million in revenue. By 2014, they crossed $150 million. By 2015, over $450 million. That's not growth, that's detonation. And here's the detail that makes your head spin. They still weren't in Walmart, the biggest consumer products retailer in America, the place where cooler brands live. And Yeti was intentionally, strategically choosing not to be there. Because Walmart carries budget products. Walmart carries commodity products. Walmart carries things people buy because they have to. Yeti was not that. And then the broader market came to them. College students started wanting Yetis. People who'd never been fishing. People who just wanted the brand. The sticker on the laptop crowd started pulling Yeti far outside its original audience, which created a new problem, a very uncomfortable one. When a niche brand goes mainstream, it risks losing the niche. The hunters and fishermen who made Yeti, who spread it by word of mouth, who took pride in being early, they started noticing their brand was everywhere. And in certain corners of the internet, there was a whisper. Has Yeti sold out? But it hasn't been perfect. In 2020, Yeti terminated their partnership with the NRA Foundation. Their core customer, hunters, outdoorsmen, was not happy. People filmed themselves destroying Yeti coolers on YouTube, with sledgehammers, with shotguns. And here's the twist nobody expected. Yeti's stock barely moved. Their sales kept climbing. Because every destruction video accidentally became an advertisement. Because every single one showed the same thing. You had to really, really work to destroy a Yeti. That crisis became their best stress test, and Yeti passed. The real story isn't about coolers. It's about what happens when two people refuse to accept the assumed ceiling of an industry. When they look at something everyone else has decided is good enough and ask, what if it wasn't? That question, that one simple, stubborn, slightly unreasonable question, built a billion-dollar empire out of a box that keeps things cold.